So good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for coming today. I'm extremely sorry about last week. We had a complete misunderstanding about the time, and while you guys were sitting waiting for me to join the meeting, I was just merrily sipping my tea downstairs, whiling away the time before 8 o'clock to come and join you. So when Pei frantically was trying to get in touch with me and finally did so, you'd all gone. So we decided to shift the presentation to this week. But anyhow, I always believe in the flow of things. And actually, I decided that perhaps there may be a couple of things I had missed off in this presentation, and perhaps it wasn't time yet to present it to you. So I managed to go through it again several times this week and add in a couple of quite interesting little points. But since we've got quite a long and a lot of things to get through today, the topics are becoming more and more intricate and more detailed. In some respects, I'm still scratching the surface on several different aspects, but I'm already going deeper and deeper now into the meaning as I seek to develop the crystal of time picture, which here on the, I just want to clarify, because at the end of our last presentation, Pei asked me, how is the base of the crystal of time, which you can see here on the left. Do you see my cursor, Pei?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, good. So you see where my cursor is, on the left side, this picture. Pei asked me how this picture relates to the actual, if you look on the right side, the final picture of crystal of time. And she said, oh, it's very similar to the crystal of time. And I just wanted to clarify that up to this point, what I've been doing is taking you through step by step of the process that I went through to create the final picture here on the right. And so far, we've only got to the point that I've completed the base of the picture. So yes, if you look underneath this quite complex looking picture on the right hand side, you will see that that base is embedded underneath the photos and the golden lines and the dark blue lines. And today I'm in particular going to be speaking about how, excuse me, I came about finding how to add these. So at the end of the last session, I finished with my second visit to Bosnia in June 2018, in which I was introduced to many different sort of scientific concepts like electromagnetic radiation and Fibonacci spiral, golden ratio. I say scientific comments, but really whenever we're talking about Bosnia, we're always talking about, in a sense, and I don't like to use the word pseudoscience because it's derogatory, but it is used in a derogatory way by mainstream scientists, whereas really what I'm not going to use the word pseudoscience. This kind of science is pushing the boundaries. It's looking beyond, and this is how inventions are created. This is how we advance in the world, is by looking beyond the standard science that we know today, and testing and trying and not being afraid, being brave enough to say, okay, maybe that works, and if it doesn't, well, never mind, we'll try something else. And I think a lot of the people that I've been meeting around the Bosnian pyramids and a lot of the scientists that I've been meeting are just these kind of people. And whereas they may be put down in some ways by mainstream academia, and in a sense, you get a feeling that there may be a kind of sense of sort of undertone of jealousy in a way, because a lot of people who don't, or scientists who won't or can't look outside the box and are sort of stuck in the conventional way of seeing things, are not able to partake in this really exciting movement of people who are pushing the boundaries and are seeking a message which is beyond what we know today. And this is ultimately, I believe, what will take us beyond and into the future in the world. So talking about people who are dealing with sort of alternative ideas, it was actually in the September of 2018 that I was invited to speak at the Global Pyramid Conference in Chicago. It was actually a very, very nice way that I got to be invited onto this program, because while I'd been in Bosnia at the second conference in the June of 2018, I'd met this very nice American lady called Marta, who comes every year to Bosnia, and just by chance one morning at breakfast we're sitting together and she makes this comment like, isn't it really sad that more women are not involved in the pyramid science? And I'm like, well, hang on a minute, I've been researching and interested in pyramids for a long time now, and my website in fact is pyramidkey.com. And she's like, oh my goodness, I'm really sorry I didn't know about you earlier, because I would have loved for you to talk at my conference in September this year, the Global Pyramid Conference. Anyhow, we kept in touch, and a month later she got in touch with me and she said, you know, one of my speakers is unable to come to the conference, so would you please come and speak? And I was like, yeah, sure, I would love to. So that's how I got to be invited on the Global Pyramid Conference. And as you can see in this picture, also invited to speak on the panel. And here I am sitting next to Dr. Karim, who's in the center, as you can see. And I have to say that it was like a blinding fork of light meeting him, because I was astounded by the similarity of our work. That was the first thing that really, really struck me. Although we were coming from very different sources, in the sense that, you know, I'd been through the training of the Tibetan masters in Nepal, and he was coming from the knowledge of the ancient Egyptian masters. And yet we were talking the same language. I was like, wow, this is really incredible. And I was able to share some really interesting moments with him, some great conversations about many different subjects. And we talked a bit about my work, and later on I'll explain to you how he impacted this picture as it progressed. So it was after the conference that I read both of his books on biogeometry. And one thing that struck me was the similarity between the way that the Tibetan masters use their ritual objects and what Dr. Karim is saying about the biosignatures. So here you'll see the base of the crystal of time on the left side here, and on the right, to the right of it, you'll see a Vajra, or a dorje, as they're called. This is a very, very important ritual object used by Tibetan lamas, both to pacify and destroy. I say pacify and destroy because that doesn't mean, you know, to do harm to people, as in to destroy, but in the Tibetan tradition, there are 4 skillful methods as to how to deal with any situation. And first is a peaceful method, second is increase, third is magnetizing, and fourth is wrathful. So wrathful in the sense of not angry, but it's like wrathful compassion. So, for example, your child is picks up a knife, you know, a cutting knife in the kitchen, and you'll say, "Hey, sweetie, you know, put down the knife." That's like the peaceful way, yeah. And then they don't put down the knife, so then you increase. I told you, put down the knife, please. and they don't put down the knife, and they're magnetizing, come on, sweetie, like, bring the knife to me, come on now, bring the knife to me, and they still don't respond, and then you're like, give me the goddamn knife. That's like, you're not doing it out of anger, you're doing it to save them from harming themselves, and out of extreme compassion in that sense. So that's what I mean by pacify and destroy. So I noticed this already, this similarity emerging between the base of the crystal of time here and the Vajra. So in a sense, like a magic wand, the clockwise and anti-clockwise movement of the Vajra causes motion and change to the inner energy fields, whereby invisible shapes like scalar antennas move energetic vibrations to shift the energy flow from one of entanglement to one of harmony. And I was seeing this very much in Karim's biosignatures. Accompanied by sound and mantra, these Vajra movements become even more powerful. So we have this, in this sense, this combination of sound, as in the mantra, the light, the visual, as in the picture. So in biogeometry, you'd say the biogeometry signature. And in this sense, we have the shape of the object of the Vajra, and the energy, the actual function that it performs in in its role, so to speak. Anyhow, this planted a seed in me, which I'm again going to come on to later as I develop this idea. But I was like, is the crystal of time somehow some kind of device? And I had no idea at that point what kind of device it could be. But I decided to keep an open mind and just let that seed stay in my mind for the time being. So now the next task at hand, so I've now got the base of the crystal of time, which you can see underneath the dark blue lines and the golden lines here. And my next task at hand was to add the dark blue and golden lines onto the picture. Now, I already knew that I would be laying down two different sets of lines to represent electromagnetism. This was something I'd already figured out, whereby the dark blue lines would represent the electro part and the golden lines would represent the magnetism part, and that in some way they should be related to each other and connected to each other in the picture. But the big question was, how on earth was I going to actually lay them down to complement each other? Because you can imagine, I'm still sitting looking at the base of the crystal of time, and this is just a concept in my mind, golden lines and dark blue lines. So how on earth I'm going to add these, I just don't know at this point. So like I just mentioned, I knew that there would be this combination of electricity and magnetism. And because it's like ages since I'd studied this subject, like kind of back in high school physics kind of thing, I myself had to go back and check the meaning of, the very basic, simple meaning of electricity and magnetism. And really, I'm taking you through the process that I went through, not because I don't think you know what electricity and magnetism is, but this was what I had to go through in order to remind myself of the process. And quite useful, actually, to go back to a simplistic meaning rather than going straight to the full meaning of electromagnetism, especially in relation to Bosnia. This was, to be honest, this was quite over my head. All these quite deep concepts of different scientific aspects, especially things that I hadn't really studied myself. So anyway, back to the basics. So electricity is the presence and flow of electric charge, electrons, in one direction. All matter is made up of atoms, and an atom has a center called a nucleus containing protons. Electrons orbit the nucleus of the atom. So these are things we pretty much know. The negative charge of an electron is equal to the positive charge of a proton, and the number of electrons in an atom is usually equal to the number of its protons. When electricity builds up in one place, scientists call it static electricity, and when it moves from one place to another, it's called current electricity. So this is all fairly basic. Magnetism is a physical phenomena arising from the force caused by magnets that can attract, as in pull closer, or repel, push away, objects that have a magnetic material like iron inside them, magnetic objects. Produced by the motion of electric charge, which results in attractive and repulsive forces between objects. This motion can take many forms: an electric current in a conductor, charged particles moving through space, and the motion of an electron in an atomic orbital. So electromagnetism, when it comes together, so in this sense, like I just mentioned, on my second trip to Bosnia in June 2018, there'd been a lot of talk about different aspects of electromagnetism in relation to the Bosnian pyramids. So now I'm looking myself at what is actually, when you put these two together, what is electromagnetism? So magnetism and electricity involve the attraction and repulsion between charged particles and the forces exerted by these charges. Their interaction is called electromagnetism. The movement of a magnet can cause electricity, and the flow of electricity can generate a magnetic field. So in this sense, the two are always interrelated. One depends on the other, so as one increases intensity, the other does too. Now, this was really, really important. When I, excuse me, when I understood this point, I realized that in some way I could interrelate the dark blue lines and the golden lines together because of this connection, this intrinsic connection between magnetism and electricity. So electromagnetism is produced when an electrical current flows through a simple conductor, such as a length of wire or a cable, and as current passes along the whole of the conductor, then a magnetic field is created along it. Now, this was something that I really needed to think about, excuse me, because what was going to be my conductor? The electromagnetic radiation produces positive ions in the surrounding air, and this is extremely harmful to humans. This is something you know very well from biogeometry. And these positive ions are what contribute to the general electrosmog. However, when these positive ions encounter negative ions, their charge is diffused and they're rendered harmless. And if you'll remember from the first session that I gave on the Bosnian pyramids, we learned about the incredible amount of negative ions that are present in the underground labyrinth at the Ravne Park at the Bosnian Pyramid complex. So in fact, the levels there reach up to 40,000 negative ions per cubic centimeter, which is just phenomenal. I mean, if you go to a really healthy place, like a really natural place, like a forest or next to a river, you'll be finding levels of between 4 and say 6,000 negative ions per cubic centimeter. So, and the other phenomenon is that the deeper you go into the tunnels, the more concentrated are these negative ions, so they get the value gets higher, which is kind of contradictory to what you think about going underground when you hear stories about people who go into mines, and the deeper you go into the mine, the less oxygen. But here it's absolutely the opposite. And in fact, Sam always tells us that, Sam Mosmanagic tells us that the reason that this is so is that whoever built these tunnels made a kind of undulating floor so that the air somehow replenishes itself. And don't ask me the physics of that, because I don't know why, but somehow this manages to keep the air very, very fresh. So negative ions also clear the air of dust and spores and fungi and pollen and raise the level of oxygen in our body. So at this point, I just want to recap on the electromagnetic activity at the Bosnian Pyramid complex, because remember, what I'm trying to do in my picture in Crystal of Time is I'm trying to add this concept of electromagnetism into the picture, but at the same time relate it to the Bosnian Pyramid complex. So the Schumann resonance of 7.83 Hertz is at the extremely low frequency portion of Earth's electromagnetic field spectrum. It's generated and excited by lightning discharges in the space formed between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. The human body also produces complex electrical activity in several different types of excitable cells, including neurons, endocrine, and muscle cells. So in other words, at different levels of the human body activity. And as all electricity does, this activity also creates a magnetic field. So 7.83 Hertz is the optimal resonance for physical, mental, and spiritual health of human beings. And as we know, this is also the natural frequency of the Earth's magnetic spectrum. So if we can be in an environment where this frequency is present, then it's very, very beneficial to our overall well-being. And because this frequency of 7.83 has been detected on the Bosnian pyramids and in the underground tunnels, this is where we can recalibrate our whole system. I say recalibrate because nowadays the general levels of resonance that we find on our planet due to electrosmog is currently running between 13 and 16 Hertz, which is way too high for us to cope properly in, which is why we feel so frenetic in many ways. The speed of our pace of our life has become so fast, and also we ourselves are easily subject to disease and mental problems as well. So being in an environment where the Schumann resonance is available at 7.83 Hertz is just perfect for our system, because it's like the heartbeat of the earth. It's like we are aligning ourselves to this tuning fork for the direction of life. This Schumann resonance, of course, plays the significant part in the harmony between the Earth's magnetic field and the human magnetic field. So it's just wonderful to go to these places and to get this kind of interaction with the Earth's heartbeat. I've already mentioned before, but I'm going to recap because I'm going to add to this in a minute. From the top of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, an electromagnetic beam with a radius of 4.5 at ground level and 20 meters when measured at 21 meters above the ground is emitted. So in this case, the beam is kind of going like this. It's not just going straight up, as in the picture on the right here. It's having this effect like this. It has a stable frequency of 28 kilohertz, varying in intensity of the voltage amplitude, which is the value of the current or the voltage, ranging from 40 millivolts to 4 volts. Its intensity increases with increasing distance above the top of the pyramid, and using a drone, the beam has been detected as high as 30 meters, but flying a drone at any higher than that is banned, so they were unable to find out how far the beam goes up into space. This is accompanied by an ultrasound wave beam of similar frequency with a radius of 2.5 to 3 meters. The weather does affect the intensity of this ultrasound wave beam, though. Hills or mountains do not normally spontaneously radiate directed energy beams from their tops. Therefore, the presence of such beams indicates that this is not of a natural origin. And the question that we're going to look at in a moment is what may be the origin of this beam. I already showed you in the first session, but I wanted to recap here the photographs taken by Dr. Harry Oldfield, who photographed the pyramids using this polycontrast interference photography, showing how these strong electromagnetic fields are being generated above the pyramids and that they have an almost vertical orientation, which is unusual, as above natural hills, there's normally this horizontal orientation. And this is not only for the Pyramid of the Sun. You can see this vertical orientation on the other pyramids and on the tumuli also of the Bosnian complex. So this fellow, Paul LaViolette, has investigated how this beam emitting from the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun may have originated. So his thoughts, I've actually pretty much copied and just sort of summarized what he wrote about it, because I didn't want to lose his thread, and also I didn't want to stray from the physics and the numbers that he put down. So to radiate a 28 kilohertz radio signal, a quarter wavelength dipole antenna would need to have a length of at least 2.7 kilometers. Now that's really long, 2.7 kilometers. I suppose that's almost several miles. Such antennas normally radiate over a very wide angle, not confining their mission to a beam. So you would not expect to see or to experience what you do above the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun in that sense. So beam emissions are found in lasers, but no laser is known to laze at such a low frequency. It could be a phase conjugate beam similar to technologies developed by the military for use in microwave beam weaponry and aerospace propulsion, but that would be more advanced than our 21st century technology. So that's another thing to consider. The beam may also have a source above the pyramid, i.e. in space, but this would require the presence of a geostationary satellite and should be known about to most defense departments, which it doesn't seem that that is the point. Now, the most probable theory is that, and the other possibility is that the source of the beam is hundreds of meters beneath the center of the pyramid. And so this is an experiment that was done to find out if this is so. Whereby a 40-watt signal ranging from 23 to 33 kilohertz was fed through a square antenna deployed along the top of the pyramid, attempting to create an interference between their applied signal and the signal beam emerging from the top of the pyramid. The resulting interaction was picked up by a series of electromagnetic wave and ultrasound wave sensors placed at different locations around the pyramid. And the results of this is that it implied that the pyramid's electromagnetic beam originates 2,440 meters below the pyramid apex, which is interestingly nearly the same as the length of each side of the equilateral triangle that's formed between the three main pyramids. If you remember, I told you on the in the first session about this connection between the Pyramid of the Sun, the Moon, and the Dragon, that if you connect the three apexes together, that you'll find that it creates this equilateral triangle with these sides that are the same in length, and angles obviously are the same. But this signal would also require a power source of at least 10 kilowatts. So the question is, where would that power source be operating from? Now, his theory is that at this 2-kilometer depth, there may be a large disc-shaped iron layer. And this is where we come back to the conversation that we started about the possibility of there being an iron plate somewhere beneath the pyramid. So at this 2-kilometer depth, there may be a large disc-shaped iron layer whose center is displaced 410 meters away from the pyramid's central axis, about 10 degrees off axis. And this I'm actually copying from Paul LaViolette's work, and I don't know why it would have to have its center displaced by 410 meters and be about 10 degrees off axis. But this is how he writes it. And that is somehow being electrically energized, like we've mentioned before, and Sam has also mentioned that this is perhaps by underground water streams and cavities that are interacting with this iron plate. So to emit these excuse me, electromagnetic waves and focus them towards the pyramid apex. This would explain why the signal increases in intensity as one moves upwards from the top of the pyramid. So this subterranean iron antenna dish may be focusing at a point some tens of meters above the pyramid, which would result in the signal strength increasing as this point of convergence is approached. But, now this is extraordinary, this dish would have to have a radius of 2.7 kilometers to properly emit this wave. So again, that's a huge size of iron plate in the deep inside the Earth. And I mean, I suppose it's feasible, and that it could be that this is actually this is actually there. And the one thing that I don't know is whether they have been able to actually detect this or not, or whether this is still just a theory. This would imply that the existence of a high-tech fuelless generator has been functioning for 34,000 years. And of course, this is way too much for the mainstream academics to handle. A similar 28 kilohertz energy beam has been detected emanating from the top of the pyramid of the moon. However, here, a primary beam of 28 kilohertz is found to be modulated with a higher frequency beam of around 42 kilohertz, 1.5 times higher in frequency. So these 28 kilohertz and 45 kilohertz signals are like the second and third harmonics of a 14 kilohertz signal, with an indication that a resonance phenomena is taking place within the pyramids. Sorry, I have mistaken there. I should have written these 28 kilohertz. Oops. These 28 kilohertz and 42 kilohertz. I wrote 45. It should be 42 there. So you'll see that last session, I discussed with you about the octaves of harmonic resonance. And so we are finding that these harmonics are somehow present in the frequencies that are displayed at the different key points of the Bosnian Pyramid complex. Now, what may be the purpose of these signals? It has been proposed, and we talked about it before, that it's to do with the well-being and health, a place where people can come and recalibrate themselves and realign themselves. And Sam has often said that this may have been the purpose of the pyramids, was simply that. It was also proposed that it's some kind of communication beam. And when the ultrasonic beam of the pyramid of the sun is electronically converted to bring its sound down to the audible frequency range, its modulation sounds to some people as though it's conveying some sort of information. And now they actually managed to record the sound of the pyramids. And the reason why I'm using this different format today is so I could play this to you. This comes from a CD called Message of Lemuria that was made by a French guy who used the recordings of the sound waves being emitted from the different pyramids around in the Bosnian complex, but also added some of his music to it. So I'm going to play you just for a short while. I'm going to play you this the sound just so you can hear. It's as I mentioned here, this possibility that some information is being conveyed.
Has it started?
Yeah. Can you hear it?
Maybe you need to unplug your
okay.
Yeah. No, instead of using the headphone, unplug the headphone.
I'm doing that. Hang on.
Oh, okay.
It's jumping around now. Okay. Something's going on here. Hang on. The communication is okay. Let's see if you can hear it. Yeah. Can you hear it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So oops. So you get the idea, right, of this. Could you hear that okay, Pei?
Yes, there's a little bit jittering. So I wonder whether it's from the original sound or is it from the internet?
It's probably from the original sound, because it does
okay.
sound, it's meant to sound very kind of space-like and jittery. In any case, when I put the this PowerPoint up on the website after the session, then you'll be able to play this whole section. It's about 5 minutes. Yeah, I didn't want to play the whole of it to you now.
Oh, great! Thank you.
But you heard this kind of. This is the this is the a recording when they excuse me, when they brought this sound down to the audible frequency range, that you could hear this kind of incredible message, almost like a kind of message, like somebody's talking.
Right. Yes.
So this is something I really wanted you to be able to hear. Now, it's also been proposed that this beam is there as a spacecraft homing beam marker. Okay, this is quite way out. Airports use the same concept. They transmit an electromagnetic homing beam that airplanes use for landing while on autopilot, and also to call attention to the pyramid structure, in the sense that the builders of the pyramid may have created this beam so that future generations would be notified of its presence and not think it merely a mountain, as perhaps they knew that one day it'd be covered by flood deposits and would need to incorporate a marker beam. So these are some things that have been put forward, some ideas that have been put forward as to the purpose of this beam. Now I come back to my original question. How was I going to represent the electromagnetism idea in the Crystal of Time picture? Remember, I've still only got the base, and now I need to add the golden lines and the dark blue lines. So putting together all this information, plus what we talked about last time, my in-depth study of Nagas, serpentine beings, and dragons, the connection of dragons to the fire element, which is of course representative of electricity. And if you remember what I talked about last time, the shape I'd stumbled upon, which is actually here, many shapes actually, that I'd stumbled upon through the mirror equation while attempting to create the dragon face out of the fractal pieces of paper 1 to 10. If you remember, I added all the numbers together and then I subtracted between, and then I made this whole list of numbers, and then I plotted them on a graph, and then I got them plotted into the computer, and then out came this image, and this correlation basically to the shape of the caduceus. And of course, as always in this project, I'm following intuition, and not only intuition, but the road as it's presented to me. So I'm really keeping my attention on everything that's happening and the ideas that are being presented to me, such as meeting Dr. Karim and biogeometry, such as people talking about electromagnetism, such as before I described to you how I got involved in the Naga issue and the dragon lines and all of that. So I therefore decided to choose one angle of this shape, as in this shape on the left, that I discovered from adding together the numbers 1 to 10 to represent the electro part of my description of electromagnetism in the Crystal of Time picture, and that they would be represented by dark blue lines, whereas the golden lines would represent its corresponding magnetism. So let's look a little bit at the caduceus. Now, I'm going to give you a sneak peek, as in, I'm not going to give you a sneak peek, but I'm just going to tell you that the caduceus is going to go way into depth when it comes to coding, the coding that, well, what I needed to encode into the crystal of time at a later stage, but still, I'm still scratching the surface on some of these issues at this moment in time. And remember, I'm taking you through a step-by-step process of my own process that I had to go through to understand and interpret the Bosnian pyramids into this picture crystal of time, because I have to make a film about it. Remember, that was the whole purpose. I started out with, it started out with Sam asking me to make a film about Bosnia, and in particular to make a film that was different to the ordinary documentaries that were being made about the pyramids, as actually quite a number of documentaries have already been made. And in particular, he liked the way that I was embedding the shapes, or a shape of a particular shape into the movie, and that would be, that would hold the meaning of the place in the shape, and therefore theoretically the meaning would be embedded into the movie if I could create the movie based on that shape. That sounds like a mouthful, but it is quite a process to do. And if you remember rightly, at this point, I'm already 2 years into making the film. This is still my research and development phase. Sam had asked me in the September of 2016 to make a film, and now I'm in the September, October of 2018 in this process. So 2 years we've been already talking about the different ideas that were coming to me as to how to make the film. So the caduceus, very, very important, of course. I studied some traditional meanings of the caduceus, was where to start. I mean, you've got to start somewhere. And I found that it's a healing tool of the ancient temple schools of Egypt, and brought into this realm by Thoth, who is the author of the Hermetica, whose instructions contain the keys to understanding the nature of reality. And it basically depicts two serpents wrapped around a winged staff, the wings of Mercury, as they're known as, who was the equivalent of Thoth in ancient Greece, the god of communication, wisdom, representing the integration of the four elements, whereby the earth is the wand or the staff, the water is the movement of the serpents, and the fire is the serpents themselves, and the air is the wings. So as you can see here, male and female forces move in golden ratio proportions around this central channel, which is this rod or staff, through the chakras. You see where they join, where they cross, where the symmetrical serpents meet upon the staff, to the head, where the two hemispheres of the brain, 1, 2, are represented by the wings. Now you see my picture here on the right, this incredible equation that I had come out of nowhere for me, and the correlation with the caduceus. I mean, it was just too uncanny in a way that I couldn't dismiss it. The central rod represents the passage of Kundalini to the pineal gland, causing altered states of consciousness. And the two twisting snakes symbolize moving opposing forces, balancing one another, creating a higher static form. Now, again, like I said, this is really the very basics of the caduceus, and in the next session, I'm going to take you into a really incredible description and decoding of the caduceus, which is starting to come to the point, actually. But since I'm taking you through the step-by-step process, I don't want to jump the steps at this point. So I'm looking also at the golden ratio and Fibonacci spirals. And again, because everything that I'm embedding into the crystal of time needs to revert back to the Bosnian pyramids. I'd actually heard from Sam that the Bosnian Pyramid of the Moon is stepped up in a Fibonacci spiral sequence, and I knew that this was an aspect that I should include in the crystal of time. And here on the right, this is the Bosnian Pyramid of the Moon. It doesn't look so big here, but it is taller than the Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. So first of all, I lay down the dark blue lines in the shape of the caduceus, which you can see here. The dark blue is a little bit kind of fading into the background of the dark of the background, but you can see how I've kept this caduceus shape one way and another way, like two dragons. We saw the pictures that I was inspired by the many Chinese depictions that I'd seen in both Vietnam and China and Southeast Asia of the two dragons playing with a ball or playing with a pearl. And so I wanted to keep this representation as well. And so I set these golden lines of crystal of time at phi ratio intervals. You'll see here that the intervals between the golden lines are increasing in golden ratio size from the center outwards. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are increasing in golden ratio, i.e. increments of 1.618 next to each other. But at this point, you'll see the golden lines are just 1 and 2 on each side. I actually sat and looked at this picture for several weeks when I'd made it. So I thought, okay, it's done now. And then I sat and looked at it and I'm like, something is not quite right, but I just couldn't put my finger on it at that point. Like, what? I'm not quite sure what to do yet, but later I realized that I would have to connect these two together, which you'll see in a minute. So the golden ratio, as I said, is denoted by the Greek letter phi and has a value of roughly 1.618. And the Fibonacci spiral's relation to the golden ratio is that the ratio of each successive pair of numbers in the Fibonacci sequence converses on the golden ratio as you go higher in the sequence. 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, etc. So you'll see that as you add each number together, so 1 plus 1 is 2, so that makes the next one 2, plus 1 is 3, that makes the next number 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, etc. So that's how the Fibonacci spiral, Fibonacci sequence is created. But when you divide the number ahead by the number before, so 1 over 0 is 1, 1 over 1 is 1, 2 over 1 is 2, 3 over 2 is 1.5, etc. As you go higher up the sequence, so by the time you get to 55 over 34, it's getting pretty close to the golden ratio, and it gets more and more close to the golden ratio the further you take that equation. So I was going to actually make out this this picture make a new sketch of this picture, but actually I decided I would just take a snap of it from my notebook, because this itself was drawn by Sam when I asked him, so tell me how the Fibonacci spiral relates to the Pyramid of the Moon. And this is what he drew for me in my notebook. I like this very much. I've added the words like top terrace, middle terrace, bottom terrace, and these numbers here just to clarify what they mean. So let's have a look. You see this, this is as we saw in the picture before, the front face, this western face of the Pyramid of the Moon, and this here is the western face of the Pyramid of the Moon. And so there are 3 terraces basically, which are proportioned in this golden ratio way. So the lower terrace, if you see how this Fibonacci spiral, okay, this is a rough picture of the Fibonacci spiral, but you get the picture. It comes round the back of the pyramid and back to the front of the pyramid, again around the back of the pyramid, again to the front of the pyramid. So creating these terraces in in three structures. So the top terrace descends downwards with, as in, it's slightly sloping, just slightly sloping down with a slight curvature and a step at one end. And it's made out of 3 layers of sandstone plates, which is a material that's very easy to work with, where the blocks are several hundred kgs each. The middle terrace is straight, with 8 degrees angle sloping towards the pyramid. So there's this kind of little angle where the probably water can drain off towards the pyramids. And again, the bottom terrace is 8 degrees ascending upwards. So one is upwards, one is straight, and one is downwards, in other words. And again, 8 degrees sloping inwards with little steps every 8 meters, probably to drain the water towards the pyramid itself. And Sam says that it's because water is present underneath each of the pyramids, that each pyramid is a unique device for creating healing water that gains different values according to the nature, resonance, and shape of that particular pyramid. Plus, there's an underground lake in the center of the equilateral triangle, and I showed you some pictures in the beginning about of the Sufi temple that's in the middle of the equilateral triangle between the pyramid of the sun, moon, and dragon. And underneath this Sufi temple is this lake of, and the water is absolutely incredible. The sheikh gave me a couple of bottles of this water, and firstly, it was absolutely delicious. I mean, it tasted like something from out of this earth, and really, really energizing. You could feel that even with a small sip or two of this water, that it was just like a medicine, something very, very, very priceless. And we're unfortunately not able to find this kind of water in so many places anymore around the world. So the 5 golden lines laid out in phi ratio, like I showed you in the picture before, in the increments from this central point outwards to the edge, are laid out in the golden ratio pattern. So how did I work out the number 5? So each side of the center of the Vajra, if you remember rightly, has 5 points representing the 5 pure wisdoms of mind and the 5 purified elements. I described to you last time about these concepts. We discussed the awareness and the perception of consciousness. And remember that I also created these 4 color Fibonacci spiral shaped pincer arms. So there are 3 of them. Here's, if you look on the left side, here are 1, 2, those are the 4 pincer arms in the colors of the 4 elements. So green is the air, red is the fire, yellow is the earth, and white is the water. And again, you've got these pincer shape. These are all in Fibonacci, laid down in Fibonacci spirals. So the Fibonacci spiral is present throughout the picture here in that sense, and also the golden ratio proportions. The golden lines are laid down in golden ratio proportions. So, but because for electromagnetism to occur, a conductor is required. So this would be the next thing that I would have to find out. In other words, how to represent the conductor in this picture. But I didn't have to search any further because I'd already laid them out throughout the whole base of the picture. And I've just turned the picture on its side here. Oh, here you can see that, sorry, I'll go back to the last picture a second. Here you can see that on the left side, the golden lines are not yet joined together. And as I said just now, I sat and looked at the picture for several weeks and I'm like, something's not right, something's not right. And then I realized after a while that these, I added actually these 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would connect up the whole picture or the whole structure to each other. Like both ends would become part of one whole holistic system in that sense. So I've just turned it on its side here so that you can see in more detail how the dark blue lines and the golden lines, you see how they touch each point of either the sides of the crystals. Either the crystals are laid down in diamond shape or in triangular shape, and you'll see that the golden lines always come out of the points of the crystal. Here you'll see the whole way through. It's always like that. So the golden lines always touch each part of the crystal, and of course the golden lines are directly connected to the dark blue lines. So everything is working now together. So both the dark blue lines, the electricity, and the golden lines, magnetism, are touching the crystals, and in this way piezoelectric energy is being generated by the crystals. So now it was time for me to have a really in-depth look at the meaning of the crystal. So the connection to the all-powerful source is only possible through staggered units, otherwise it's too powerful for the physical system to cope with. For example, you wouldn't plug your household kettle into the main electric power station because it would just blow it up. So there has to be kind of an incremental step-by-step transition from the ultimate state to the manifest state. And let's look at these three principal layers in their essential blueprint and manifest forms as pure consciousness being the essential, the blueprint being the codes of the morphogenetic crystalline field, and manifest forms being the crystal rocks themselves. So at an essential level, a crystal represents the mind, pure, clear, and empty, yet a carrier of all potential frequencies, a huge multidimensional mirror angled in all directions that can catch all frequencies and reflect and refract them into manifestation according to their category. All the crystals in Crystal of Time are but refractions of the original capacity of awareness to hold itself perfectly within its original tripartite symmetry. And I described that to you last time in relation to the Pythagorean tetrad. We looked at the 10 points of the Pythagorean tetrad with 4, 3, 2, and 1 points going up step by step by step. And how the shapes within that Pythagorean tetrad reflect this meaning of the process of awareness coming into manifestation. So crystals are carriers of frequencies and will conduct whichever frequency that you can pick up on. They are your data bank of every layer of reality. When your underlying blueprint crystalline structure is aligned, it will emanate you in the optimum shape. If you are vibrating optimally, then you in turn will shape your environment with a corresponding optimum energy. I mean, that is kind of plain common sense, really. So morphogenetic field, let's look at these crystalline blueprint field more closely. Morph means shape and genesis means creation, as in the beginning of the shape. So a crystalline body, a molecular form holding field, the blueprint that holds the organic imprints for the creation of a form, the first step in the transition from pure consciousness to pre-matter substance. So it's not yet the actual shape that's going to appear in its fullest form, but it's the blueprint of that object. All matter and consciousness manifests through the morphogenetic form. And the universe is composed of groups of these crystalline structures that occur in different frequencies throughout many dimensions simultaneously. Every cell, organ system in our physical body, as well as our entire physical body, is encompassed and surrounded by its own individual morphogenetic field encryption pattern. And this pattern holds instructions and designs in a type of coding that looks like microscopic crystal structures. So in order to create a change within any part of our body, we need to be able to connect, communicate, and reprogram the pattern of the morphogenetic field. Now the question arises, how do we do that? And I'll address that in a minute. So the third level, the manifest level, the quartz crystal is one of the most common minerals of the Earth's crust, found in igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary rocks. It has a specific crystalline form, hexagonal, and is made of silicon dioxide, which is silicon plus the positive charge, and oxygen, which is the negative charge, arranged in a lattice structure. Quartz is piezoelectric crystal, which means when you hit it, it generates a voltage across the crystal. This is the important point. It needs to be impacted in order to create a voltage. In an uncompressed quartz crystal, the charges remain neutral, but when compressed, all the negative charges slightly shift in one direction and the positive charges in the other. So there's a buildup of positive and negative charges at its faces. If you wire up these faces, the positive charge will be trying to pull electrons towards it from inside the wire, whereas the negative charge face will be repelling them. So bringing the ends of the wires close enough together, the electricity will then be able to jump the gap, producing a spark. And this is the main point, actually, that from this natural process, just by impacting the crystal, you have an electric charge. It's amazing. So any crystal can be piezoelectric if it fulfills some criteria, which are the lattice of its structure needs to contain some polar bonds. So in other words, in the sense of quartz, you've got the silicon, which is positive, and the oxygen, which is negative. And it needs to have a lack of symmetry, i.e. a diamond doesn't work because the carbon atoms are neutral, so there's no charge. So the crystals in the crystal of time picture, they form an octave of harmonic resonance throughout the whole picture, this line of 8 triangular, I'll show you with my cursor here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, triangular or diamond-shaped crystals run through the center of the crystal of time, and what ignites the shape. They are the vessels that hold and store the energy. So the crystals here are, in a sense, acting like capacitors, holding and discharging the energy, and directly relate to the dark blue lines and golden lines. So now we have 3 things together: the electricity, the magnetism, and the crystals. The crystals, in a sense, are the life force of the piece, the battery power of the form. They are what carry, or rather conduct, the electromagnetic waves. Now, you know, I haven't been divisive in making the crystals in this sense of relating to electricity and magnetism. If you remember rightly, I laid down the crystals in relation to harmonic octaves of harmonic resonance. So I was coming from one angle, and actually now this has metamorphosed into another aspect, which is as a way to store the energy of this shape, which, of course, remember I told you earlier, I planted the seed in my mind that it may be some sort of device. And this is, I'm still, at this moment in time, I'm still thinking, is this some sort of device? Am I creating something which is, this is like the blueprint for a 3D object, which is some sort of device? I mean, I'm just hanging a question mark in the air there. There's no answer to that yet. So the dragons, which are the dark blue lines, represented so by the dark blue lines, are traditionally the guardians of treasure and mind, in a certain way, mind the crystals, in the sense that they represent their piezoelectric activity. Crystals can feed off both the environment and the source, but they are controlled by the electrical output of the dragon energy, the chi in that sense, that is in turn affecting the magnetism that also affects it, as in the electrical output, in a constant feedback loop. So we've got this relationship between the electricity and the magnetism and the crystals, and they're all working together and creating this machine. The crystals store and conduct the energy of this exchange between the two, the electricity and the magnetism. So here we have the crystals in the crystal of time. If you see this large golden circle, I've put these 2 pictures of the top left and the top right. A large golden circle is revealed within the 64 colored squares. So you see the 4 different colors of the squares are arranged in this pattern like a chessboard, 8 by 8. And like I'd mentioned before to you, these are not randomly placed, but are created due to the relation between the different colors. So the red comes in, the green comes in here, the yellow comes in here, and the white comes in here, and I laid down these accordingly. But when you open up that, let's call it the chessboard of different color chessboard, inside is this golden circle with these 12 crystals surrounding it. That can be, if you look here in this chart on the right, that can be expanded into a sliding scale with a wormhole through its center. So we've got the crystal of time. This is just the crystals here, the two large crystals at the end and the 8 crystals down the middle. And then you've got this pattern of 12 crystals in the center. Also here you've got the 12 and here you've got the 12. So energy is thus drawn out from the source. So this is a question that's now in my mind. I've got these 3 things together, the electricity, the magnetism, and the crystals. And where does this, what is hitting the crystals in order to make them active, yeah? So energy is thus drawn out from the source through these 12 crystals surrounding the golden circle here, which essentially hold the secretly hidden coding within the double helix crystalline dodecahedron framed DNA for the entire structure that is coming into manifest form, found inside the nucleus of every atom of every 5 elemental structure and containing the crystalline frequency of all morphogenetic fields that connect all living beings through a constant exchange of knowledge in the language of light. Now that sounds like quite a mouthful, but really that last part of that paragraph is simply describing the process of the 3 layers coming from ultimate mind, ultimate consciousness, through the morphogenetic field in a blueprint form, and then emerging as objects in as a manifest layer. So that's carried through the 4x4, 4+4. So as 4+4 means 1, 2, 3, 4 on this side and 1, 2, 3, 4 on that side, which equals 8 crystals, forming the central spine of the object to its crowns, these 2 larger crystals at both ends, where the large crystal caps both amplify its energy while preventing it from dissipating while spreading it through its internal structure. That sounds like a bit of a paradox. So stop it from dissipating, but at the same time amplifying it. So it can go out, but at the same time it is being contained in that sense. So the crystals form a link in the chain for energy from source to the manifest world. Now, how do crystals relate to Bosnia? Well, Bosnia is rich in a variety of crystals that are mined from various regions. The area in particular of Kraljevo, which is south of Sarajevo, is especially well known for quartz rock crystals, smoky quartz, citrine, calcite, pyrite, chalcopyrite, azurite, malachite, cobalite, cinnabar, barite, geothite, and many others, which I haven't mentioned here because the list would just be too long. And other areas of the country, such as Fornica, which is about an hour from Visoko, also famous for its healing waters, has plenty of quartz. This is a picture of just a display of some crystals. In fact, this is the pyramid on the edge of the Pyramid of the Dragon. So here we have mining of crystals. Can you hear?
No what?
So the fellow is, hello? Am I back online okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we could hear you.
Could you hear the video okay?
We heard some words. It didn't.
Okay,
the person didn't talk a whole lot, right?
That's right. Actually, he was talking in Bosnian, so you wouldn't probably understand what he's. But the point of that video is really to show you that he's picking out quartz crystals just like they're stones from the mountain. I mean, it's just so much availability there.
Yes.
So here we've now got, again, I'm back to Paul LaViolette's explanation for how the energy beams emitting from the pyramids and tumuli are generated. So similar to the electromagnetic emissions, the ultrasonic frequency emissions, which are mechanical waves ranging between 9 to 28 kilohertz, 10 meters in radius, are emitting from the top of the pyramid of the sun. And these potentially occur since the large concrete blocks, which I described to you in the first session, covering the pyramid of the sun, are made from large amounts of quartz crystals mixed into the clay and conglomerate, which cause a piezoelectric effect. So natural conglomerate rock containing quartzite also extends for kilometers into the surrounding land area. So we've got these man-made blocks which are on the pyramids, and we've got this natural conglomerate rock which spreads out across the landscape. So like quartz, quartzite is piezoelectric, which means it will generate electrical fields if vibrationally excited. So quartzite grains or rocks have natural resonant frequencies. The larger the rock, the lower its resonant frequency, whereas a quartz crystal with a 10 centimeter thickness will naturally resonate at 28 kilohertz. So that's our frequency range here. The speed of sound in concrete is 3,400 meters per second, which is about 10 times the speed of sound in air. Therefore, an ultrasound wave manifesting a frequency of 28 plus or minus 6 kilohertz in concrete will have a wavelength of 10 centimeters. So bingo, this is something very interesting. This means that the ultrasonic vibrations generated by the quartzite will produce sound waves whose wavelength, 12 plus or minus 3 centimeters, approximately matches the dimensions of the quartzite rocks that are resonating at this frequency, and hence will sympathetically reinforce their vibration, causing self-amplification of the resonant vibration. So, therefore, this ancient architectural plan to construct a pyramid encased in concrete made of embedded quartzite may have been purposefully done as a way of amplifying a resonance that was naturally present in quartzite rocks of the proper dimension, which is why I mentioned the 10 centimeters, etc. And here on the right, you can see that there are quartz crystals embedded in the concrete blocks. These are concrete blocks from the Pyramid of the Sun. So moreover, because these quartzite rocks are piezoelectric, they will be producing an oscillating electromagnetic field of the same or similar frequency. Quartzite has a different resonant frequency than the example given above for quartz, depending on the impurities present in the rock. But in general, the resonance will have a wavelength size that will center around quartzite rock inclusions of about the size that are found in the concrete and conglomerate layers. So if the quartzite conglomerate making up the concrete encasement of the pyramid and also the underlying naturally present quartzite conglomerate layer are radiating ultrasonic and electromagnetic waves at this particular frequency, then it is conceivable that the resulting electromagnetic wave component could be focused by the iron dish-shaped reflecting layer that might underlie the pyramid and thereby be directed upwards towards the pyramid apex. So, actually, the 28 kilohertz electromagnetic energy beam may be deriving its energy from the pyramid's ultrasonic energy waves and their resonance with the quartzite in the conglomerate. So this is a fairly logical explanation of how this beam may be being generated on the Pyramid of the Sun, and perhaps on the other pyramids and tumuli as well. So now we come onto another topic which is really, really important and which I've developed quite a lot and embedded into the Crystal of Time picture. And this is the aspect of Hertzian waves versus non-Hertzian waves. So let's just go through what a Hertzian wave is and what a non-Hertzian wave is. So common forms of energy like light, heat, sound, and electricity both have particle and wave-like properties and can be measured in terms of amplitude and frequency. They are also known as transverse waves and require time and effort to move through space. So you see, they have to move along a horizontal line. Whoops, I've got rid of it there. They have to move along a line, and that takes time and effort. A Hertzian transverse wave is also an electromagnetic wave in the radar and radio range produced by the oscillation of electricity in a conductor, and has a length ranging from a few millimeters to many kilometers. In 1964, Maxwell proposed a comprehensive theory of electromagnetism, predicting that coupled electric and magnetic fields could travel through space as an electromagnetic wave. And the first controlled experiments with electromagnetic waves were done by Heinrich Rudolf Hertz in 1888. So this goes back way back. So similarly, or rather on the contrary, non-Hertzian or scalar waves are a completely different kind of electromagnetic wave, which exist in empty space between the atoms of our body and that above the Earth and between the stars. So they're closer in their properties to magnetism and are created when two common electromagnetic waves come together from two opposite converging vectors. So here you'll see in two different places, and they converge here in the center. When the energy vectors meet, the equal frequencies cancel each other out, leaving a static or stationary form of energy and zero frequency, which is the scalar zero-point energy field. This energy is like an ocean of infinite energy, has the capability to carry information and of imprinting itself on DNA. It cannot be measured directly with 3D equipment, as it exists outside of relative time and space, they say in the fifth dimension. However, its effects on objects into which it has been embedded, which I demonstrated this picture here, can be demonstrated with Kirlian photography or gas discharge visualization. So we often see the effect of scalar waves in clouds, in fields of wheat, in structures of rivers and other natural phenomena. Scalar energy, and even the way that the hair on our head can kind of spiral from the crown outwards. The scalar energy is more field-like than wave-like and does not radiate as waves like a transverse wave. So like I just said about transverse waves that go like this and take up time and energy, but expands outwards in circles of energy like a pulse, but it doesn't pulse, it just in one go, so it reaches everywhere immediately. So there's no effort required, it's present everywhere immediately. It is capable of passing through solid matter and does not require time and effort to reach anywhere. So this makes the potential for this kind of energy is absolutely incredible, and is also correlated to our most pure form of consciousness, that actually when we're in an extreme state of awareness, that we are existing everywhere immediately and without any time or effort to get there. So it's really a phenomenal thing to think about. The potential of these scalar waves is mind-blowing. So the space it occupies comprises a network of harmoniously balanced fields. And here's a recap on scalar waves in relation to Bosnia. As the strength of the electromagnetic energy beam increases with distance from the source rather than decreases according to laws of Hertzian wave phenomena, these fields have been identified as non-Hertzian. So we're talking about the beam that's coming out of the top of the pyramid of the sun here, that potentially this is a longitudinal, or rather longitudinal is just another word for scalar. They are potentially longitudinal and scalar in nature, and torsion fields, as described by Tesla 120 years, who was experimenting with such non-conventional waves which ran on zero-point energy at that time. I mean, that's a long time ago, but he was completely squashed by the money-making guys who didn't want us to have such technological advancement, which was free energy at that time. They wanted to make their money. Much quicker than the speed of light, the scalar waves are much quicker than the speed of light, which is 300,000 kilometers per second. and they can move through the universe, even through cosmic bodies, without losing any energy. So whereas it takes 5 billion years for light to reach us from the center of the universe, scalar waves travel 10 billion times faster. So they're an ideal medium to transport energy and information over vast differences, which again comes back to this potential of the energy beam coming out of the top of the pyramid of the sun and the other pyramids and tumuli in the Bosnian Pyramid complex as having some sort of communication mechanism. So now, again, by chance, through a friend in Bosnia, I was introduced to Dan Winter, who has been also, unfortunately criticized by people for his mind-blowing work, which is really genius. He's taken some of his ideas from and expanded other people's work, but the length and depth of what he's been studying and developing is really mind-blowing, very incredible. So I had the fortune to be taken to his home, and here we are cooking up a dal soup while he's describing to me the meaning of this icosahedron structure, which is what you're going to see in a minute when I show you the next pictures. So just after returning from the States, so we've just shifted on a couple of months during this whole presentation, and I'm taking you through my thinking and the process of research and development that I went through. And then this subject of Hertzian and non-Hertzian is hanging around my mind. And as if to answer it, the universe provides me with Dan, who is going to tell me exactly how to transfer Hertzian waves to non-Hertzian waves, just like a dream. And this process he calls pine cones kissing noses, which is very sweet. So just after returning from the States, from the Global Pyramid Conference in Chicago, back in Europe, I was invited by a friend to meet Dan Winter in October 2018, where I learned about this phenomenon of transferring the Hertzian to non-Hertzian waves. So just a little bit of background here, which is very interesting and very nice to know before I get into this. Dan says the universe is made of rotating compressible waves of charge. That rotation spin, when nested in rose-like fractal conjugate patterns, creates implosive charge that got centripetal. You can see here, this picture here, which makes gravity and mass in the center and ultimately consciousness. So this is why sacred places are built at the dodecahedron rose-like crosspoints of Earth's magnetic lines, which are embedded in longitudinal electromagnetic frequency by phase conjugation. Conjugate plasma is the only possible electrical physics of Stargate or real meaning of temple. So for example, the city of Prague, you can see here, the ancient city of Prague was designed in this same phase conjugation shape, which is the physics of stargates and alchemy. These are portals of living plasma projection, i.e. a perfect place for birth, living, and death. Many other examples of these in the ancient world, like Hopi burial grounds, ancient stone circles, star fortresses, etc., that are built to draw the energy into the center at golden ratio proportions. So, for example, if you were living in the old city of Prague, this outer macro design shape of the city would be causing each of your cells in your body to be aligning and having this centripetal spin, so that you would be optimally living your life healthily. And the best place for a baby to be born, because it would be born into a place where all its cells would be completely aligned in this shape, and also a perfect place to die, because you could escape through the center of the for want of a better word, of the stop gate. Now remember the translation of the Proto-Runic language found etched on the stone inside the Bosnian tunnels. This is what this reminded me of anyway. The gateway has been closed. I mean, gateway, what is the gateway? Could it be that this is the gateway? We will have to stay, defend ourselves, and conquer until the cosmic gate is open again. And this is what we're looking at here. We're looking at a centripetal force which exists inside each of our cells, which exists along electromagnetic, the lines of the Earth, and in power points of the Earth. And so this raises some questions. Is phase conjugation required to open the Stargate? What is blocking this conjugate phase implosion taking place? Is it something within ourselves, as in human beings? Is it something that's blocked within the human structure? Or is it some configuration along the Earth's magnetic lines that's been blocked? Or in relation to the Bosnian pyramids, is it something in the area around the Bosnian pyramids? So these are questions that I'm now dwelling on. People, lightning, tornadoes, etc. only remain alive as long as they are electrically centripetal. Hospitals with all their electrosmog are worse places for birth and death, best as sacred sites, which are naturally centripetal. So the electrical implosive negentropy is the cause of origin of consciousness and life force, implying that this universe is not condemned to entropy, as scientists would want us to believe. This requires our understanding of why gravity itself is negentropic, and this is where Dan's research comes into the fore. This is what he's been working on. You see here, he's created this Therify machine, and I'll describe this to you in a minute when we look at how the Hertzian waves are transformed into non-Hertzian waves. When millions of people meditate or sing in synchrony, their bioplasma makes a centripetal force which measurably affects solar flares, as stars like the sun are also supremely aware, and they pick up on this energy. Focused human attention causes electrical fields to compress in a golden ratio pattern, and we can measure the centripetal bliss through brain waves, which causes negentropy, which is the opposite of death. Here you can see, through using the Muse kind of band on the head, you can see how the brain waves have been measured, starting at beta and increasing to alpha, then increasing even more to theta, and then eventually emerging as delta, and how they emerge in gold, again in this golden ratio proportion. This would be a perfect expression of brain waves optimally operating. So in that sense, the religion of entropy seems like old, dead physics. A universe condemned to entropy believes essentially only in death, energy systems that move only towards chaos and not towards the self-organization, which is life itself. So this is what Dan's Therify machine is doing. It is infusing you with that thing that he was holding in his hand in the photograph, the icosahedron image, or the little structure that he was holding, is what occurs at the center of these two objects. I'm going to show you some more pictures here. So the normal electrical field inertia in the rotation charge field of electrons is as transverse waves, where the primary motion is perpendicular to the direction of the wave. Almost all of our electromagnetics today use the transverse component of the electrical wave. So you can see here that transverse waves are coming into the center, the outside of the cone here. So spin creates both space and time. The cause of centripetal force to center the spin, gravity, does not bend space-time. It is simply that the presence of near vortex of charge implosion, the center of gravity, affects the spin rate, the speed of time of nearby charge nodes. So to convert transverse waves to longitudinal, you must make an antenna, a spiral on a cone, as only longitudinal EMF can reach into the nucleus. So what you've got is transverse waves coming in, spiraling down the cone, and emerging as longitudinal waves in the center. And that's what happens in Dan's Therify machine. And it has to come from two sources. So the transverse wave will come in from this side and from this side and will emerge in the center as a longitudinal scalar wave. So you're sitting basically in 0-point energy here. So spin, here you can see in the picture the two waves coming into the center and coming into the center here. And then, in fact, the shape that Dan was holding in the kitchen as I was stirring the dal soup, this is the dodecahedron, dodecahedron shape, which is the centripetal force, which can take you through the center of the nucleus, basically. So spin through center can eliminate disorder in conjugate charge implosive geometry. Many scientists already agree that fractality is the cause of gravity. So when you place a perfect golden spiral on a cone in 5 turns, you get a phase shift from transverse to longitudinal EMF, in other words, scalar waves. In electrical engineering, this is referred to as the phase conjugate way to produce longitudinal EMF from transverse. It requires fractal embedding, phase conjugation, where the pine cones kiss noses. You can see these two cones where they come together at the center and thus become part of the faster than light longitudinal grid of scalar waves, superluminal longitudinal EMF charge distribution, non-destructive gravity waves. So this is how gravity is made and how consciousness is made. Good consciousness is made. Golden ratio is perfectly fractal, perfect fractality, the essence of phase conjugation in wave mechanics, where synchronicity is nothing more than charge coupling produced by conjugate embedding in the fractal charge rotation intervals called time. Now, I'm going to come on to that subject in our next session, because this is something that I've been discussing with Dr. Corinne, in fact. So just to recap, the charge wave starts as a transverse wave on the lip of the cone and ends as a longitudinal wave at its tip. But this is the translation of vorticity, a phase shift into the next dimension. As these waves of charge proceed down the golden ratio pent, as in 5, again we have the number 5, vortex, where phase conjugation occurs, a very precise translation of vorticity occurs. The longitudinal wave is literally the path out. So this is the entrance to the cosmic gates, the Stargate? I mean, this is a question that we have to consider at this point. Non-destructive charge compression through the speed of light. The Planck dimension, both length and time, is specifically the threshold at which this translation of vorticity, the doorway through the speed of light into the longitudinal grid, is possible. Perhaps, and this is my own addition here, I have nothing to back this up at this point, perhaps where it enters the morphogenetic field. This information, as you can see, look at these two pictures, this one and, this one and this one, the crystal of time with the golden lines and the blue lines on top of it. This information is now embedded into this, into the crystal of time. So we have this idea of the translation of, from the outer point to the inner point, this translation of transverse Hertzian wave to longitudinal scalar wave in the center. And in a minute, I'm going to show you how this expands into the next stage. Actually finally adding the dark blue lines, golden lines, and the photos of the Naga beings to the crystal of time. So now you can see, I just wanted to add a last note to this wonderful knowledge about this translation of vorticity. As the cloud of charge phase conjugates and implodes towards center, producing the gravity, it also produces negentropy, as in the opposite of entropy, as the charge waves converge and phase sort. Their passage through the center is limited only to those waves which can interfere constructively which cancels out any wave that is out of phase coherence, thus producing negentropy. And Dan expands on that, saying that only lovable thoughts, in other words, can get through into the central part. So at death, when we die, we will only carry with us the waves that are not producing that are producing good vibes, in other words, rather than those which are creating negative aspects. Because you can only time reverse towards order, this has profound implications for our ability to rejuvenate. So now that I've added here all the photographs, in fact, all the photos you see on the outside and all these photos throughout the whole piece, they're all dragons and snakes and serpents. Anything to do with the serpentine being is included as part of these photographs. So I write here, now the dragons are really guarding the treasure because the information that's now encoded into crystal of time is getting more and more precious. As you can see, this has profound implications for our ability to rejuvenate, to go towards negentropy rather than entropy. And this is phenomenal. So now I send the picture to Dr. Karim, and he says, add 2 lines. And he sends me this lovely little picture here, just add this line. And the words that he wrote along with the message, in order to raise its overall vibration to a much higher level so that energy vibrating from the combination of shapes and lines in the picture is harmonizing the time energy pulse at all levels of biological functions, achieving a holistic healing effect. By adding the 2 strokes, the reflection of the time pulse radiating towards the viewer is balanced to achieve a centering, spiritual energy quality as in sacred power spots. So without any to do, I did it. You'll see here, there's no lines, and here and here, there were no lines, and here, these 2 little lines were added. And I sent it back to him after that, and indeed he said, yes, it has done what he thought it would. It has made it even more powerful. For some reason, this line along the center needed to be continued, and it was missing here at this point on this, in this version. So I'm ever grateful to him for having me add those 2 lines there. So now we come to finally the 3rd trip to Bosnia in June 2019, where I gave a lecture about the crystal of time, pretty much what I've told you up to date. And at this point, there's a lot of talk about time travel. And this was the occasion when I went to the Sufi temple, met the sheikh, and had a very big discussion on the sounds, the sounds that the Sufis use and the movements they use, the center of the pyramid complex, and as you know, I didn't need to say it to him, the sheikh told me himself, the multi-dimensional portal that exists at the center of the equilateral triangle there. And putting all this together, I couldn't believe how the process had unfolded, that all this information had come to me, so to speak. All I had to do was follow the road. All I had to do was to meet the people who'd been introduced to me. All I had to do was just to be in the places where I was taken to at the time. And the information was coming to me, everything I needed to know. Because, as I told you, these are all things which are completely beyond my understanding. I've had to research. I even had to go back and study what high school physics says about electricity and magnetism. I mean, you know, really, this was way out of my depth. And so I had to really stretch my mind in all aspects to follow this road. But like I said, just following it, it all came to me and the information was right there. So also on this 3rd trip to Bosnia, I made a point of not filming at all. The first 2 times I went, I'd been filming, and I decided I just wanted to be there, be present, go to each of the places, each of the points, each of the pyramids, and just feel it, really, really feel it. Now, next time, I'm going to discuss with you what happens next, because this was totally, and I mean underlined 20 times, totally unexpected. I thought I was done and dusted. I have my crystal of time, I have the shape, I'm ready to make the movie. I start making the movie when I come back from Bosnia after June 2019. I come back to India in the September or something. And what happens? Another picture emerges. And this is something I'm going to describe to you next time. Also, I'm going to backtrack a tiny bit from what I've just told you, because straight after the conference in Bosnia in June 2019, I went to Victoria, Canada. I was invited by Dr. Karim to talk at his conference at the end of June 2019. It was quite tight, actually, between Bosnia and time-wise, between Bosnia and Canada. But in that sense, Karim had asked me to talk about time in relation to crystal of time, and so I had to put my mind in that frame for a whole to develop a whole understanding of the time aspect within crystal of time. Now I've been looking at all the science aspects and the harmonic resonance and the Naga pictures of the Naga beings and the dragons and the other scientific aspects. But now I was going to have to look at time. And in having to look at time and then putting together all the things that I'd studied so far, when I got back to India, I started making the movie, but was interrupted by this picture. So, and we have got a way to go still, because it's actually quite incredible that I discovered through this next picture the crystal of time itself was only scratching the surface of something else that I had absolutely no idea that I would have been taken to. So I leave you with that next time we're going to discuss all of those issues. And I'm sorry we've gone on way over time today, but if I'd kept it any shorter, we wouldn't be able to do and to get through all the things that we still have to get through in our next session. So I leave you with that today. Thank you very much for coming and for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Susan. It's very fascinating following your journey, and you got a lot of help and inspiration along the way. It's really, really fascinating. I wanted to ask you if you have the origin of the script that was inside the pyramid. Do you have the? This is an English one that you post, so it's a translation. I was just wondering.
You're talking about the Stargate, this one, the gateway.
Yeah, the Stargate. Yeah. Do you have the?
Yes, there's the runic. I could find a picture of the runic.
Okay, that would be great.
The stone with the rune. I'll try to locate that. Yes, I can probably get that off the internet. I don't have a picture. I might actually have a picture of it.
Yeah, maybe I can also Google it.
I know. I have it on video, but I don't have it on as a photograph. I can probably get it off the internet, I would imagine, yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes, certainly.
Yeah, it will be, yes, interesting to see
would you take a question?
what it looks like.
Yes, of course, please, fire ahead.
Just very shortly, what was the sound clip that you played for us? You
okay.
Pyramids, and each of them has at least one frequency, 14, 28, and 42, etc.
Yep.
What is it that we listen to in that clip?
You listen to, in fact, I can play it to you again. You listen to a sound clip from the Pyramid of the Sun. Here we go. the Pyramid of the Sun, they actually recorded the frequency of at the top of the Pyramid of the Sun, and then they converted it down, so to speak, into an audible range, so we could hear it within our audible range in that sense. So would you like me to play that again? Shall I play it?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'll play it now. I'll just take off my headphones. Here we go. Can you still hear me? Maybe the computer mic is on now.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
I'm going to just play this to you again. So just listen to, my computer has got a little bit of static as well. You can probably hear a shh on the computer, but at the same time, you will, this is a very, I'll put the volume up as high. Okay, let's see. Okay. The music above is created by this French fellow, yeah? But what you're listening to is this kind of space-like voice, like talking. That's the Pyramid of the Sun talking. It's incredible, huh?
Yes. So just to clarify, the sound, the music is added in, right? The sound is the original.
The melody is the frequency, yeah, that was actually recorded from the Pyramid of the Sun. So what you hear, this kind of space-like voice.
Mm-hmm. So only the voice is coming from the pyramid. Okay. Mm-hmm. Actually, we can't quite hear you.
Well, what I suggest is that when I put the presentation up onto the website after you've sent me the link, then you'll be able to go to this page 13, and you can play it for yourself, and you'll be able to hear it more clearly.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that.
You'll be able to hear the division between this kind of space-like sound and his music on top, which is just to complement it, really.
Oh, okay, got it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank
All right.
you so much.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very interesting because there is various layers of sound there, and there is also a significant amount of no sound, and that would be the non-polarized part of the frequency that of course we cannot hear. So that is that's a lot of thought processing going there for me. Thank you so much.
It's really quite something, huh? And they also recorded the in fact you can buy this CD, I think, or you can download it even from the internet. That's why I've put the link here. You can, oops, I keep losing my page. Sorry, this is a different way of presenting on the Mac. The presenter view of the is different.
Yeah, we could see
so
it.
I keep losing my page. So yeah, you can, so here the meditation CD, I think you can probably download it from this website here, harmonyfrontmusic.fr, or from the Bosnian Pyramid website as well. If you have any trouble with that, then please let me know next time, and in fact, what I'll do is I'll get a link anyway for next time, so that you'll be able to find that. But I think it should be available at harmonymusic.fr.
Okay. Yeah, we'll check that. And
yeah.
We'll
Also, you can just
right.
Google it, Message of Lemuria. It'll probably come up. You'll probably find a way to download it online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So I think we'll end this presentation now. Well, is there any more questions? Let me just confirm that. Okay. So we'll have the next